All right. Today we'll be talking about a number of things that relate to our research methodology, um, and specifically we'll be talking about theory, theoretical framework, as well as the four research strategies: theory or theory building, and the four research strategies. So we will start with the, shall we go to the first slide so that I can see the first slide?
Um, hello, Dr. Bustami.
Yes.
This is Ammar, and I am present here, but I don't know, by mistake, it seems that I clicked on absent, and it is recorded, self-recorded now as absent, my attendance.
Okay.
So, what to do? I'm very sorry.
Log out and log in again.
Log out.
Log out
I
and
don't
log
know
in again.
how.
All right.
Okay. Okay. Now
Um,
I've signed out.
yeah. Okay. Theory, theoretical framework, and research. Four research strategies. So what I will be talking about relates to what I have presented before about the four research strategies. So you will see the relevance and how theory will be applied or connected to the four research strategies, right? So we're talking about theory, theoretical framework, and four research strategies. And at the end, we will also be talking about the conceptual framework and the difference between theoretical framework and conceptual framework. All right, we'll go to the first slide. This is not a very long lecture, just to go through some key points again about the four research strategies and its philosophy of research. The first research strategy is inductive research strategy, and the underlying philosophy is positivism. You know, under this philosophy, observation is king. Observation is the most important part to build a scientific research, and data that cannot be observed is not considered a scientific data. Right? So the second one is deductive research strategy. Deductive research strategy, uh, uh, its underlying philosophy is critical rationalism. For deductive research strategy, the idea of falsification is a big part to the whole research strategy. So the logic of falsification is the backbone of deductive research strategy. If the first one, inductive research strategy, emphasizes on observation and observable facts, and deductive research strategy looks at falsification. If a theory cannot be falsified, it is not a scientific theory. So again, these are all research strategies that are born uh, out of a period in time in history where at one point knowledge was held by theologians. So these are in a way research strategies and philosophies to liberate knowledge and science, from the constraints of theology and theologians. So that's the second one. The logic of falsification is the backbone of deductive research strategy, meaning the idea is actually to not necessarily prove a theory to be right, but to actually be able to falsify theory. And the truth might not be known, but one can come closer and closer to the truth, right? So we falsify the false theory so that whatever remaining is corroborated by data. And once we discover new data that will prove or disprove rather the theory, we will remove that theory. So we are coming closer and closer to the truth. And the point here is that we are critical, we are rational, and we do not uphold a certain orthodoxy, we do not uphold a certain ideology, right? But we are true to the methodology, and we are critical with whatever ideas and ideology that are presented to us. So that's the second one. Retroductive research strategy. That's the third one. Its underlying philosophy is scientific realism, and we write there: search for the real and search for the whole. So retroductive research strategy is a research strategy that seeks to understand, to capture reality, even though reality cannot be seen. And as we know, retroductive research strategy sees reality as having three realms, three layers. So, and sometimes we might not see the whole picture until we develop the model to understand the whole picture. Like I said, in science, we have photosynthesis. No one has really seen photosynthesis, but if you can construct a model to explain photosynthesis, we can actually put together the facts and the processes and the logic that we are able to prove photosynthesis. Just like power of magnet, no one has seen power of magnet, but we can come up with a model where we can gather data to prove the power of magnet. So likewise, the power of veto, likewise, we see the process of destruction, processes, social processes, right? So these are processes that might not be seen empirically, but exist in a different layer of reality. So that's the third one, retroductive research strategy. And the fourth is abductive research strategy. Interpretivism is its philosophy. And for abductive research strategy, what it emphasizes is the subjective reality. And to understand the social world, we need to understand the social world from the social actors' point of view, because they are the ones who construct social reality. And if we to go in with our own conceptions, with our own lenses, with our own theories, we might be seeing things that are different from what the social actors see and interpret, and so we be conveying a different truth than the truth that is seen and lived and conveyed by the social actors. So it's the social actors world, right? So that's the fourth one. All right. So this is the four research strategies we'll be talking about. We will talk about how we will connect theory and theoretical framework. Thank you, Sasa. With the four research strategies, right? So we'll go to the next slide. So if you remember donuts, right? Inductive research strategy and positivism, and the O there, O, the donut, and the O represents observation. So inductive research strategy emphasizes observation and observable data, right? So we go to the next slide. I won't be going through giving repeat the lecture that I've given before, but I'm just going to capture the essences of inductive research strategy. First is he believes in objective knowledge. So inductive research strategy believes that we can capture objective knowledge. So in a sense that we researchers are not to go in with our own conception. We need to go in with a clean slate, right? A blank slate, and then we can collect data without biases, with our own biases. Yeah, we don't go in with biases. We go in to collect as much as possible, and without biases, with our own prejudices. Yeah, it's almost like a scientist, right? Well, not almost like a scientist, right? Because positivism actually derives its philosophy from the natural sciences. So, what is it? So, in a way, the objectivity is a big part of inductive research strategy. So, as I said, data collection is the beginning of inductive research strategy. You begin with data, and then you follow through with data analysis. From the data analysis, we did pattern explanation. from the pattern explanation, you group the data, you see certain patterns, and from the patterns you can come up with generalization or theory building. You will start be able to do theory building. And ultimately, for inductive research strategy, the ultimate goal, of course, is to actually come up with like laws of reality, just like laws in the natural sciences, laws of gravity and all that, right? So in economics, we have law of supply and demand, and we want to understand in a way how the world work or how the world functions in the context of a social reality, just as much as uh, scientists, natural scientists can understand the natural sciences, social scientists can understand the social world, like the physical world as well. So this is the essences. Then if we go to the next slide, um, the second research strategy is deductive research strategy. If you remember the hammer, right? Milner, the Milner, and the emphasis on critical rationalism is on the big T, which means is there to test, to falsify, to break all fake theories, right? Right. So we go to the next slide. This won't be a long lecture. It's a short lecture. There are four key steps to it. Sorry, this is inductive research strategy, right? Not deductive yet. So deductive, there was a wrong slide to show. The slide that should come after this slide, right? The four key steps to inductive research strategy, right? Because we are talking about theory and theory building, right? We start with observation and data collection, and then we go to an analysis, and then generalization and conclusion. So if you ask, where does theory come in? Uh, Vis-a-vis inductive research strategy, it is here. It is after analysis. It is in the theory building that you have the theory and the theory building, right? So here is where we talk about theory. So you can see for inductive research strategy, we do not start with theory. We end up with theory building. Now, you might ask the question, so we should not read about theory? No, no, you should read about theory. That will be in your literature review and all that. You still read about theory. You still read about past studies and research that other people have conducted, right? The only part that is not done here is that you do not start with theory. You start with observation. Now that said, of course, other research strategies will critique inductive research strategy, saying that how can you go in to the field and collect data without having theory, without having some conceptions of what to collect, right? Well, that's true, but the philosophy of positivism is that you go in, with a clear mind, with with a clean slate, and then you collect data, and then you let the data lead you, let the data explain the reality, right? Not theory, right? So as far as theory is concerned, the theory comes in only in the third step, but you can, technically speaking, yeah, you can go in with knowledge of theories to see what possible data you want to collect. But this might be in contradiction with the philosophy of positivism, right? That said, for practical purposes, oftentimes when we carry out research, we usually will refer with to literature review first, and then only we see what we want to study. When we have certain assumptions, maybe we have certain ideas, and you can start collect data. However, as I emphasized before, this is an approach that is supposed to be presuppositionless. You are not supposed to presuppose, right, any connections, any theory yet. Yeah, so you go in with a clean slate. You go in, make your observation, carry out observation, and from your observation or from your data collection, then only you construct the theory, right? Now we go to so this is the inductive research strategy. We'll see, go to the next slide. Just now we talked about deductive research strategy, right? We showed the slide, Thor and his hammer, hammer of Thor or Mjolnir, right? So for deductive research strategy, it is an approach that is quite different from inductive research strategy, in the sense it is the other way around. Uh, for inductive research strategy, you start with data, but for deductive research strategy, we start with theory and then hypothesis. Hypotheses that are derived from theory, right? If we talk about theory, uh, deductive research strategy is the research strategy that uh, upholds theory, criticizes theory, rejects theory, and supports theory. Okay, so the first step is you start with theory and you have hypothesis from a theory. Number two, from the hypothesis, you collect data, you do data collection. Number three, if the test fails, then the theory is false, right? Theory says this, but when you collect data doesn't correspond to the theory, then the test fails. Then you reject the theory. The theory is false. That's actually a good thing, especially if you are conducting research for masters and PhD. Falsifying an important theory is actually a contribution. Right? Number four, if the test succeeds, right? If the test succeeds, then the theory is corroborated but not proven to be true. If the test succeeds, so you will find the data support the theory, right? It corresponds to the theory, it corroborates the theory, but what you say is that the theory is corroborated but not proven to be true. So in the deductive research strategy and for the philosophy of critical rationalism, um, there is no ultimate truth, right? We only come closer and closer to the truth. We inch towards the truth. Start with that tentative theory. That's where the theory comes in, right? And under the second step there. When you identify the theory, that's where it is, right? That's where the theory comes in. And from the theory, you bring out, you operationalize certain hypotheses or propositions, and then you test your hypothesis, your proposition. There will be another fourth, on the fourth oblong there, right? You test. If there is confirmation from the observation, then the theory is supported tentatively, right? Tentatively meaning temporarily, right? Not permanently, right? Only tentatively. If not, the theory is rejected. So if you go through this is called the critical testing process. So the more a theory is being tested and not rejected, the stronger the theory is considered by the community of social scientists, right? So what we want to do with any theory is that we want to test the theory. We want to test the theory in different fields, different countries, different settings, different contexts, right? As long as the theory cannot be proven or disproved, right? Proven false, right? The theory will be corroborated, supported tentatively. So that is so. If you ask me where the theory comes in, it is in the second step, right? The theory goes in there. And for deductive research strategy, theory is important. So unlike inductive research strategy, which emphasizes data, deductive research strategy emphasizes theory and the idea of the task, the mission of social scientists, the mission of scholars, right, researchers actually, is to falsify theory, to test theory, to question theory, right? And that's why the term is critical rationalism, is to be critical with the theories that are presented to us, so that we do not accept blindly any ideology or orthodoxy or dogma that is thrown to us, you know. And as a society, especially a community of scientists, community of social scientists, it is our responsibility to check and recheck and confirm and reconfirm whether the true or the whether theory is false or not, right? And that way we can come closer and closer to the truth. Um, so in a way, this is in a way it's a humble theory, right? But so we as social scientists do not know what the ultimate truth is. We can only come closer and closer to the truth. But so, but we can reject theory. We can question theory. So the idea of falsification is an important thing. Falsification of what? Falsification of theory. How do you falsify theory? By collecting data to falsify the theory, right? So these are the four key steps in deductive research strategy, and the theory comes in right in the second step there, right? Go into the next. Right. So the third one, if you remember, right? So we have all the superheroes here. Well, although this is not quite a superhero, as I said before, it's more like a villain, hero, split personality. Retroductive research strategy, right? And scientific realism as its philosophy. The U there is like symbolizing the magnet, right? You know, magnet there, right? So oftentimes we cannot see a certain reality, doesn't mean that the reality doesn't exist. So a retroductive research strategy sees the world from three different realities: the real, the actual, and the empirical. While deductive and inductive research strategies tend to emphasize on the empirical, the retroductive research strategy will want to unveil or reveal, to unearth, right? The many layers of reality, right? So that's retroductive research strategy, and the idea, the philosophy is scientific realism. So let's go to the next slide. The essence. For retroductive research strategy, the most important sphere, the most important reality is the real sphere. The real sphere is where the power is, where the generative essence and the causes are there. So our job is to actually reveal the real sphere, the real reality, and how, and demonstrate how this real power, right, gets manifested in different spheres, right? So number one is the understanding that social scientists must capture the real, even though it is unseen, right? So you got to demonstrate the real in a research process. Number two, construction of hypothetical model to capture the explanatory mechanism. So for remember, retroductive research strategy is not just interested between independent and dependent variable. They're interested in how the process of how independent variable or variables lead to dependent variables or dependent variables. And it's not just by looking at moderating and mediating and control variables, but they want to see the process of how one reality eventually leads to the empirical reality. So it involves a lot of model testing, right? From the data to the theory to data, data to theory to data. So this is retroductive research strategy. This is I'm just recapping. I'm just summarizing what I have explained before in my presentation on retroductive research strategy, which you could get from the video that's uploaded in YouTube, right? Okay. Uh, there's three spheres of reality. This is again to refresh our mind about the three spheres of reality. There's the generative mechanism, there's the manifestation, and there's the experience or empirical, right? So like magnet, like veto power, you cannot see magnet, you cannot see magnetic power, we cannot see veto power, right? We can only see the manifestations of it. When a veto power, when magnet shows its power, right? That will be an event, right? That will be case two. That will be the second layer. But the power exists there, whether it shows its power or not, it exists. So that's what we say about the real. The real exists regardless whether it is manifested in different spheres, in different realities, right? Veto power exists even though we cannot see it. But when there's events that reflect the veto power, right, or the events that reflect the magnetic power, right, then it goes into the second sphere, which is the actual, which is also known as the events. So the certain events, but certain events can be seen, certain events cannot be seen. Certain events manifest themselves empirical, certain events might not manifest themselves empirical, which is the highest level. Empirical is where we can observe, right? So the job, the task, the aim of social scientists is actually to show, to demonstrate this process of how the generative mechanism, the cause, the causes, the power, right, manifest into events, and how do we capture the events empirically. So by the empirical data, we can show the process, we can show the existence of this layered process of reality. Right? So there are three spheres of reality in retroductive research strategy. If you want to know more, again, strongly encourage you to watch the presentation on retroductive research strategy, which is uploaded in YouTube. And the next slide. So the six key steps, right, for retroductive research strategy is first, there's occurrences, certain assumptions, so certain phenomena, right? So we see certain phenomena. We want to know, why is there traffic jam at 6 o'clock in the city center, for suppose with that phenomena. So we come up with some hypothetical model of explanatory mechanism, right? You have the hypothetical model, you have a framework, right? A framework, but it's still hypothetical, meaning it is still temporary, it is still tentative, right? From the hypothetical model, we carry out observation, right? So or test. We want to see whether this model reflects reality or not. So we capture the test, we look at certain numbers, we look at statistics, we do interviews and all that. And you see, well, there's certain things that still cannot be explained by this model. So you go back and improve your hypothetical model. You go to the fourth step, right? And this is actually being repeated to the next one, the observation. You test again. You go through this iterative process, right? You keep on going until the model can explain as much as possible the reality or the occurrences or the phenomena that you want to understand. But understand that also that you are not just using empirical data to prove or disprove a theory. You are building a model of explanatory mechanism. So it's a causal model, not just a descriptive model. You want to explain how things come together, like why is that there's traffic jam at 6 o'clock, or 7 o'clock, right? Well, you say, well, people think that they can avoid traffic jam at office, when office ends at 5 o'clock. So they say, well, they postpone leaving their office and they go at 6 o'clock instead, 7 o'clock instead. So what happens when people leave at 6 or 7 o'clock? They'll have traffic jam, right? Traffic jam in the city. And you know what? The cause of that cannot be seen. The cause of that is in the minds of the people. The cause of that is in assumptions of people, right? It is unseen. But how do you show it? How do you prove it? That is the challenge of retroductive research strategy, right? That is the challenge that retroductive research strategy wants social scientists to show, to demonstrate, right? So, like I explained before, oftentimes people talk about, what is it? Broken family leads to juvenile delinquency and deviant teenagers, right? Broken family, deviant teenagers, right? But this is dependent variable supposedly. But what's the process that leads to that, right? Is it about the finance? Is it about the communication? Is it about the meanings they attach to certain events in the family? Is it because the relationship between the mother and the children, or relationship between the father and the children, or is it the relationship between the children and the surrounding? There are so many things they can put together into a model of explanatory mechanism, right? So when you put together all these variables into one model, right, and you keep on testing, collecting data, and you see your model becomes much and more accurate to reflect the reality, and that's where you have this discovery at the end, discovery of the explanatory mechanism. It might not be 100%, but it can come close to as well. Is this model explains 70-80% of reality, right? So theory comes in there. The theory building comes in at the end. Now that's it. For a retroductive research strategy, theory building comes at the end, but the whole process is actually theory building. So theory comes in at the hypothetical model, theory comes in the improvement of the hypothetical model. So the theory comes in many spots, right? Not just at the end, but the theory building, the final theory building is at the end. The final theory is produced at the end. But theory building, the theory goes into the process. Yeah? Whenever there's an improvement of hypothetical model, theory goes in there as well. So we talk about theoretical framework or conceptual framework, it will go in there as well, right? So these are 6 steps of retroductive research strategy. Okay, next slide. Okay, we come to the fourth research strategy right now. The first is inductive, second is deductive, the third is retroductive, the fourth is abductive research strategy. And its philosophy is interpretivism. Remember, we talk about, and there's another superhero here, Professor Xavier, Charles Xavier, right? The young one and the much more senior one there, right? They can actually read mind. Read mind was clairvoyance, right? Clairvoyance. The power of clairvoyance. Clairvoyance, no? What's it called? When you can read mind? I don't know. Okay. Yeah, clairvoyance, I think that's the term for it. When you can read mind. So let's go to the next slide. So abductive research strategy, as the picture shows there, is about reading minds. So we want to capture, for abductive research strategy, the researcher attempts to capture the insider's point of view, to abduct, right? To kidnap, right? To abduct the insider's point of view. You want to see the world from the social actor's point of view. Assumption is that the world is already being interpreted by the social actors. So we go in with our own theory, with our own conceptions, with our own variables, right? Then we are not understanding, we are not capturing the world that is being understood, lived, and conveyed by the social actors. So abductive research strategy, the essence, number one is to understand the insider's point of view. Number two, the process goes, the process follows the idea of understanding everyday typifications, which means everyday language, everyday concepts. So When if you want to understand the millennials, we got to go to the millennials world, get their concepts, get their language, get their everyday conversations, and see the world from their everyday language, right? So you want to capture that, and then from there, which is called the first order construct, right? And then followed by from the first order construct. Okay, from the first order construct, we build a second order construct. So in the second order construct, that's where we introduce our own technical or conceptual or theoretical knowledge. So the creation of second order construct is where the first order construct, the themes, the language, the concepts from the social actors get interpreted, get translated into a higher order language. Right? So let's go through the steps. So four key steps. First, unlike all other research strategies, abductive research strategies does not begin with theory, does not begin with data. It begins by entering the social actor's mind, entering the social actor's world, and capturing their world from the social actor's point of view. So we do not start, if you're carrying a abductive research strategy, by your own theory. You go in, you ask the social actors, how do you see whatever you want to see, right? Uh, how do you want to understand? You ask them if you're interested in why they smoke drugs, right? They use drugs. You ask, what does it mean using drugs? What does it mean to you? And let them tell the story about what drugs usage mean to them, and then let them tell the story. What does it mean to be an employee in this company? What does it mean to be an employee in a manufacturing company? What does it mean uh, to be involved in CSR projects, right? You ask them, right? So let them explain, and you use their concepts to construct, to identify. So you identify all their concepts, all the constructs, right? And then that will be the second step, everyday concepts. They will use their own language, right? And then you capture their language as much as possible. You ask many different questions, right? If you're studying organization, you can ask about different aspects of organization. You can ask about different experiences, different projects. If you're studying CSR, what do you think about the company's CSR community project? What do you think about the company's environmental project? What do you think about the company's workplace employees programs? What do you think about the product responsibility, right? What do you think about the company's policy? Let them explain to you, and you get all this first order construct. And then from there, you use your own technical interpretation to group them together, and this is where theory starts to come in, right? But then ultimately, when you have the technical interpretation done, you end up with theory building, right? So theory building is at the end, right? At the end, you will have theory building. But if you ask me again, so I do not read literature. I do not do I need to understand any theory at all? I said yes. You do need to understand theory. Yes, you do need to understand literature. And if I'm your supervisor, I'll ask you to read different theories and to use those theories, the concepts from those theories, as sensitizing concepts. So this is more technical if you're talking about qualitative research, right? So sensitizing concept, we can ask about sensitizing concept, right? So uh, if 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 you're if in a CSR there's something called a shared value theory, so you can throw that word to them and ask, what do you think? about this chapter? Do you feel win-win? You know, do you feel win-lose? How do you feel about this situation, right? So you can use theory as a probing construct, as a way to probe answers, right? It's a part of your probing questioning, right? So you can do that, but it is not applying theory, right? Uh, and for abductive research strategy, the theory is actually constructed through and grounded on the everyday concepts, everyday constructs, the first order constructs of the social actors themselves. So this is at the end, that's where the theory comes in, right? The theory building comes in. So the end, you come up with a theory, right? And usually abductive research strategy, you will come up with some novel theory, something original, because the theory is developed by the social actors themselves, and usually it is very original. So we move to the next slide. Okay, take take a minute to look at the slide before I explain it. Okay, let us let's go through. Yeah, you be going uh, to understand even more after this lecture. It'll be a second lecture on theoretical framework and conceptual framework. But I do want to give you a brief overview of theoretical framework and conceptual framework. What's theoretical framework, right? I will not go deep in explaining what theoretical framework is, but I will give you a survey, an overview of what it is, right? So a theoretical framework, and I'm explaining it in the context of differentiating it from conceptual framework, right? So theoretical framework is a framework that's grounded, that is established, uh, is formulated based on theories from literature and previous studies. So a theoretical framework, the word there is theoretical framework must come from theories from the literature and from previous studies, right? Yeah. So that's the general understanding of what theoretical framework is. Generally, not all the time, right? It involves independent variables and dependent variables. You all know, right? Independent variable is something that leads to the dependent variable, right? Yeah. You eat more, you become stronger. You eat more, you become heavier. Eat more, you become fuller. You know, that's becoming fuller, stronger, heavier. That's dependent variable. Eating is the independent variable, right? So you have independent variable, dependent variable. So theoretical framework will have that. Dependent variables are coming from theories, right? So theoretical framework coming from theories that are being established by by other people, right? So people have written about the theories. You use the theories, right? So in the framework, so it becomes theoretical framework. So usually at the postgraduate level, we also talk about moderating variable. We also talk about mediating variable. We also talk about control variable, right? Moderating variable is a variable that is connected to dependent variable, right? It might not be connected to independent variable, but it can influence the dependent variable, right? What does it mean? Suppose you say, when I eat, I become strong, right? There are other things that can make you become strong. When you lift weights, right, you can become strong, right? You can build muscle that way. So when I eat protein, I can build muscle too, right? So, but if you remove weightlifting, right, that can affect your building muscle as well. So eating might not affect your ability to lift weight, but lifting weight can affect your building muscle, their dependent variable. So that can be a moderating. So it's more connected to the dependent variable, whether they become muscular or not, or fat, whatever. Right? Mediating variable, mediating is in the quantitative research is an attempt to explain the how and the why. So you say if you eat protein, right, and then you uh, eat fat, right, and then you eat carbohydrate, right, you become fat, right. But if you eat protein only, you remove certain things, or you become, you remove the mediating factor, right? Then you build muscle. Otherwise, you do not build muscle, you build fat, right? So mediating factor or mediating variable is something that comes in between the, the independent dependent variable, or it can come as something that is affecting both of them, right? So that's mediating variable, right? Can go in deeper afterwards, right? Control variable is something that is not in the scope of your research, although it might affect the dependent variable, like the weather, the health, whether you eat burger or not, but you do not want to uh, bring that into your research. So you have it as a control variable. So you control the age, maybe, you control the gender, maybe, you control the blood type, you control whatever, right? So you're not interested, but you want to make sure that those things are not things that will complicate, contaminate your outcome, because those can affect as well. But so you control them, you make that something that would not affect your research, right? You can go deeper into this when you in your discussion on quantitative research, right? I will talk a bit more afterwards in the next slide. The point I want to raise here is about differentiating between the theoretical framework and the conceptual framework. So the theoretical framework will have all these variables, moderating variable, mediating variable, control variable, right? But conceptual framework, there are four schools of thoughts, four views about this conceptual framework. Number one is that theoretical framework is under the umbrella of conceptual framework, because conceptual framework is the bigger, larger picture, the larger framework of your research, right? It encompasses the substantive part of your research. So theoretical framework is under the umbrella of your conceptual framework. So under my umbrella, Rihanna, there, right? That song there, okay? So theoretical framework is part of the conceptual framework. That's view number one, and it is actually a strong view, right? It is a dominant view about the distinction between theoretical framework and conceptual framework. The second view says, well, theoretical framework and conceptual framework is more or less the same, right? Not many people hold this view, but there are such views out there. So there's no real distinction, or people do not really care about whether there's the theoretical framework or conceptual framework. That's the second view. The third view is that conceptual framework is formulated by combining several theories. So when you combine, when you carry out a research, you find out there are three different different theories to explain the dependent variable. You combine all these theories together, you have, because you build this there, you come up with your own, your conceptual framework that is a synthesis of these three theories, right? Or a combination of these three theories, that is known as conceptual framework. So conceptual framework is formulated by combining several theories. So that's the third view. The fourth view is that conceptual framework is formulated by the researcher's own logic. The researchers has its own logic, understand the literature, say, well, I take this part, I take the other part, and but informed by or combined with existing theory. So the researchers can combine a bit of this theory or a bit of that theory, or the researcher himself or herself come up with his or her own variables, right? So that can also be conceptual framework. That's the fourth view. So there are four different views of what conceptual framework is, right? So when you ask us what's the right way? My answer to you is the answer is right. Ask your school or your center or your faculty or your supervisor, right? So up and away, go ask them. Ask your supervisor, and since you be guided by your school or your faculty or center or your supervisor who has that supervision, yeah, that's why it's called supervision, right? The supervisor has supervision. Yeah, so you ask your supervisor, so you follow. If it's like if you learn Tai Chi from a Tai Chi guru, you follow the Tai Chi guru. If the Tai Chi guru says, use yin and yang, you don't use from your foot. This is wrong, right? If you want to learn karate, you follow karate's principle. So you follow your gurus, your 师傅, or you follow your top guru, or you follow your ustaz, right? Follow what your supervisor wants you to view, to see. If they say conceptual framework is view number one, you follow that vision. Vision number two, you follow that vision. Vision number two, three, four, follow the vision. No vision at all, you no vision at all. Okay, let's go to the last.
Can I have a question, please? So no vision at all?
What was that? No, supervisor has supervision, right?
If no vision, if no vision at all, we go and sing with the
classes. You buy classes and you have vision, right?
And we go and sing with Hannah.
May I have a question, please?
Hold on, I haven't finished yet, right? So I'm giving you, this is like super visual. So we have mediating variable. So mediating variable is something that comes in between independent and dependent variable, right? So the independent variable affects the mediating variable. The mediating variable affects the dependent variable. Or the mediating variable, the independent variable can affect mediating variable, and the mediating variable affect the dependent variable, the other way around. So the second one is possible. But moderating variable can stand alone in the sense that it presence affect that relationship, and it affects how independent variable influences on dependent variable, but it is not necessarily, independent variable might not affect the moderating variable, right? Whereas number one, number two, independent variable affects the mediating variable, but number three, independent variable does not affect moderating variable. So moderating variable can be something that is separate, but still affects dependent variable, right? So that is the differentiation between moderating and mediating. You can ask our lecturers later on who will explain about quantitative research. All right, and then
Doctor, I have a question, Doctor, please.
Yes.
How are you, Doctor? And everybody? Doctor, how can I distinguish between the moderating variables and mediative variables?
Extremely important question there. The answer is in the air. Well, the answer is in the literature. So the literature will inform you based on previous research what has been found to be affecting dependent variable alone, or some variables that also being affected by the independent variable. So it is through literature review. Now, you might have certain thoughts, you might have certain logic about the connection between that variable with independent variable and dependent variable. If that happens, then you might be developing a conceptual framework because you are coming up with your own framework of how to carry out your research. But remember, there's four views of conceptual framework, right? So you got to ask your supervisor what's his view, right, of a conceptual framework. So to answer your question, how do you know whether it's moderating variable or mediating variable? The answer is you got to look at the literature, what other theories have explained, what other studies have shown about the relationship between
Can
the
you
different
give me example, Doctor?
Yeah. May I have a question, please? So
Go
to
ahead.
clarify the concept, remember, as for the mediating variable is concerned, for example, we have the three variables: independent variable and dependent variable. Independent variable is teaching, dependent variable is learning outcomes, right? Learning outcome is highly dependent on independent variable, like teaching, the kind of teaching being done, right? So what is mediating variable? For instance, some students are taught by different coaching classes. It's a mediating variable, right? As for the moderating variable is concerned, it will be explained by, so because it's a bit confusion, mediating is something that is mediated between the two variables, right? Like tuition, like coaching classes. And for the moderating, I would request the sir to please clarify the concept of moderating variable as well.
Very good explanation. Since you take that as an example, IQ could be a moderating variable, IQ, right? So if you have high IQ, right? So IV has about how hard you work, how hard you study. IQ is the ability, your own intelligence, right? Your intelligence quotient, right? So that can be a moderating variable, right? And IQ stands independent of how much you learn. So that can come in, and that can affect the learning outcome as well. So moderating variable can be something independent of independent variable there, right? And but can affect the dependent variable. So somebody who studies hard and has high IQ would probably have better learning outcomes, right? So that is, if you want to put in moderating variable IQ in your theoretical framework. If you do not want it to be part of the theoretical framework or your conceptual framework, you make it your control variable, right? Because you are not interested in looking at IQ. So you take people of similar IQ and you say, well, I've already controlled for IQ. I do not find any differences, no statistical, statistical significance, right? So IQ is not important. Or whether the person ate burger or not before that, I want to consider that as well. So I remove that, I make it a control variable. So that's why I have burger picture of bigger burgers just now, right? So
Sir,
that's
Hello,
moderating.
doctor.
May I
Hello,
ask this?
doctor.
Yes, yes.
Yes,
Sir.
I want to ask how can we incorporate control variables in this kind of relationship? Because we have seen the giving and mediating with IV, but when we have a control variable, how can we illustrate it with this chart?
Oh, control variable. How do you do
Yes,
that?
yes.
You got to use a statistical formula. It is in a computation they can do that, right? So that will be under quantitative research lecture. That is much more detailed. So we are talking about calculation, computations later on, right? But
Okay.
it is an important part of a theoretical framework as well, especially or conceptual framework, especially if the control variable has a significant impact on the dependent variable. But you're not interested to study the control variable because the
Okay.
control variable has been studied many times before, and there is no novelty or originality in studying the control variable. You're interested in studying something else. So, you know, to answer your question there, it is about the calculation. There'll be computation. So there's because we are talking more
May I
about
ask?
quantitative research.
Okay.
I will not go deep
May I
into
ask?
quantitative research. Go ahead, ask. I will not go deep into that because we have lectures. I think we have two
Yeah.
lectures on quantitative research.
Yeah.
Yeah, go
My
ahead.
question about the identifying the independent and dependent variables. it should be only through literature review and studies review, previous studies review, or can I add, as a scholar, can I add further variables not mentioned before in any study or any previous theories? Thanks.
All right. I did mention just now, if you're doing just theoretical framework, then it must be based on established theories. But if you're using conceptual framework, then you can have your own logic, and you got to justify why you choose those variables. I'm actually with you. I think as a scholar, as a student of any field, you might see, new variables, new emerging realities, and you will argue, you'll be able to argue certain things that should be incorporated into your conceptual framework, right? So I'm with you on that one. So uh, in that case, you want to have a conceptual framework. But again, remember there are four interpretation of a conceptual framework. Go and ask your supervisor whether you
Sir,
use conceptual framework or theoretical framework.
sorry for interruption. Just one clarification is needed. Kindly,
Yes.
as for the theoretical and conceptual framework is concerned, as for my understanding, what I understood that a theoretical framework basically means the kind of theories and the literature review that we have formed, and the kind of understanding that we have concerning previous studies that must be replicated in our own study, should have a reflection in our own study. But for for conceptual framework, am I clear or am I confused that conceptual framework is basically what we have really understood and to apply that in our own study concerning methodology, concerning our instrument and things so on and so forth.
Raja, can we go back to the previous slide? Right. Oh, excuse me. So, Sam Breeze, they're fixing the roof in Sam Breeze, so I'm allergic to the dust. So there are four interpretations or four views of conceptual framework. One view is what you said just now, the theoretical framework is under the umbrella of conceptual framework. So conceptual framework is larger, which basically encompasses your research, including the methodology of your research. So there are different definition of how big this umbrella or how big this house of conceptual framework is. But the point here is that the theoretical framework is underneath the conceptual framework. So that is one view. So conceptual framework can be, something very encompassing, like the whole of your research or whole of your research design. So that is one interpretation of what conceptual framework is. So in that case, a methodology will be part of your conceptual framework. So conceptual framework can be, basically it's a framework of concepts, right? Conceptual framework, the framework of concepts. These are semantics, right? So play with words, right? So, but I myself, I do not put a high value on distinction, this differentiating between theoretical framework and conceptual framework. But I'm a supervisor. I want to make sure all my students get through the viva. I want to make sure all my students get through the defense. So I must make sure that they are able to defend their case during the proposal and during the defense. Right? So they must understand there are the different points of views in this world, right? So I think if I'm your supervisor, I will give you some advice that if somebody will to pose you a certain question, well, sorry, professor, I understand where you're coming from. I've read this. Based on Johnson and Johnson said this. Johnson said theoretical framework, conceptual framework has no distinction. But Pfizer said conceptual framework is formulated by combining several theories. But Sinovac say, you show, oh, okay. Then you say, oh, okay, this guy knows his stuff. She's a good scholar. Right? So you want to be able to defend your case by showing that you understand the variety, the diversity of thoughts, and why you choose that particular thought. Right? I'm presenting to you the different interpretations of what conceptual framework is, so that you understand the variety of explanation. But as I said down there, right? So what's the right way? What's the answer? Go and ask your school, your center, your faculty, especially your supervisor, right? So and then because different schools, different fields have different conventions, so you go and ask them, right? I'm giving you
Sure.
this, right? Yeah, am I answering your question?
Yes, sir. Absolutely right. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Welcome, welcome. All right. There'll be another lecture. We'll go more in depth about all this, right? So, Associate Professor Dr. Azim, our director, will be explaining more in depth about all this, right? I did not go very deep into certain parts of this explanation. I was connecting more to the four research strategies, but I thought I just wanted to share some thoughts I have about theoretical framework and conceptual framework with you, vis-a-vis what I've explained prior to this, which is the four research strategies. All right, ladies and gentlemen, any more questions? Up and away.
Yeah, please, Dr. Bustami. How are you?
Oh, good, good. I'm fine. Thank you.
I'm like a ghost now. I'm like a concept. I don't know. I'm here, but I am absent. I logged out and logged in, and the same issue is there. I don't know, by mistake on my mobile, I clicked on absent instead of clicking on present.
Oh, you keep on clicking on absent. All right.
Yeah, I keep on thinking, am I a conceptual framework or a theoretical framework?
Okay, I think you can review this. We have streamed this in the YouTube as well. I think. Have you, Raja? In a minute, it will go up, right?
I only record, bro. But
Okay, we will upload it later. We will upload it later. But right.
Excuse me,
So,
Doctor.
yes.
Thank you.
We will
This
upload it.
this is Ravi. Doctor,
Okay. Yes.
please, I joined just this is the second lecture for me,
Second
and
lecture.
I need
Welcome back.
yeah the second. The problem was with the IPS.
All right.
So I want to join a group, and I found a group, and this group, they told me that they submitted the list for the school. Can I join them now?
You can speak with the group, and then if they like to, they will bring you into the group. It's fine.
Yeah.
Or you can join another group if you like.
No problem, but this is the only group that I have communicated with them. So they told me that they have submitted 2-3 days ago, and they told me that I was informed that after today there will be a marked deduction for the late. But this is not my problem, the IPS problem.
Okay, all right. This is still week 6. Let me see, sorry. Still week 6. You're not late yet. It's still week 6, so you still have time as long as it's been submitted this week.
So if the group already submitted, they can add me, no problem.
They can, of course.
So okay, they took a permission from whom? From you?
You do not need my permission. You can just go in and include yourself in the group. As long as the group, we have a minimum and maximum, right? So
Yeah, they are
5
6.
to 8.
I told that they are 6. They are 6. Okay, they're supposed to be
You can,
up to 8.
yes.
Is between
Yes,
5
Prof.
to 8.
Yeah, they're still
5 to
6.
8.
Yeah.
If they are still 6, you can still join them. The
Yeah.
maximum is
Yeah.
8. The minimum is 5.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, doctor. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Yes, Assalamualaikum, Prof. I have
Waalaikumsalam.
a brief question. Yeah, I am Ahmad Deva from Indonesia, Prof.
All right.
You
Welcome,
did
yes.
explain about four research strategies, and can researchers use more than one research strategies to achieve their objective of research, Prof? Or it is feasible for us to just use one research strategies?
Yes, the answer is yes. You can use more than one. I will be cautious if you use more than one, but the answer yes, you can use more than one. There are different research design that you can employ more than one research strategies. You know, the explanatory sequential design, when you have quantitative and then you have qualitative, or terbalik, you know, terbalik apa bahasa Indonesia? Terbalik sama. Terbalik, the other way around, which is qualitative and then quantitative, which is called the exploratory sequential design. So you have, if it's explanatory, you have quantitative, you find the answers from the quantitative and use the qualitative to explain why, you know, to explain explanatory. And then that would mean you might have two different research strategy operating at the same time, right? Or the third one is the convergence parallel design, which means you do qualitative and quantitative parallel together. So in that way, you could have two research strategy, right? And by the way, you know, the different research strategies would have different philosophy as well, different flows as well. So you need to take note of that. Yes, the answer is yes, you can.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Prof.
Okay.
Yeah.
Doctor, please, last question.
Yes,
Excuse me, sir. Okay.
The last question.
Doctor, just I'm communicating with the leader of the group. He informed me that how could he edit, or should he resubmit for the school?
Oh, you're talking about resubmission. Not the school, right? You're talking about group assignment right now. We're not talking about the school yet, right?
No, I'm talking about the group of the
Group
course. Yeah.
assignment. Okay, the group assignment. So the group group assignment. If you have problem with that, then you resubmit the what is it, the group members. The group members. The title remains the same, right?
So they should resubmit that only.
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. So
This week is just the title and the team members. It's just that we are not asking more than that.
so they're supposed to resubmit that after adding my name.
Sure. Yes. Yes.
Appreciate it, Doctor. Thank you for your time.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Doctor,
Yes.
well done, sir. I want more clarifications on confirmation of theory or validations of theory. How do we know that a theory is being? How do we confirm a theory?
How do you
Whether
confirm?
our findings support or it goes against a particular theory. Because I'm a little bit confused about that. Because I'm thinking, is it where there is a significant relationship between DV and IV? If there is positive relationship, is it then that we said a theory is being confirmed,
I can't say the.
or what? I can't understand how to confirm a story.
How do you confirm? All right. That's a big question you're asking there. So, if you're asking about how do you confirm a theory, you're talking about how do you prove or disprove a theory, right? So, usually it is based on data collection. So, if you're talking about deductive research strategy will uh, confirm a theory or, oh, sorry, not clear. What, closer maybe? Closer, yeah. Okay, but deductive research strategy will not confirm a theory as in confirming theory, but deductive research strategy will reject a false theory, but whatever theory that's left is being supported or corroborated as a theory, right? So they reject the false theory, whatever remaining is considered supported, but not considered as true yet. So that is one way to answer your question. The other one is if you're talking about retroductive research strategy, it is again through the process of data collection and to see whether the data collection fits the theory or not. Meaning, if the theory predicts or the theory explains the reality in a certain way, but the reality that is shown through the data, right, does not fit the theory, then the theory is being rejected. So it is still, since we are talking about social science, it is still a science. So the empirical part is still an important part. So data is still important. We cannot run away from data in that sense. So it is through data, and it is through the logic that the theory is supported or or negated or falsified, right? So you do need that. There's
Thank you.
of course, if you're doing quantitative research, right, there are other means to show the a particular theory, and usually we are talking about correlations. We are talking about you know, the strength of particular hypotheses. There are many tests you can carry out to show that. So it depends on how you define what you want with your computations, right? Okay.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, you still have another lecture to go. So if there's none, then I will leave you to the next lecture. The next lecture is already being uploaded. Dr. Saz is there. Dr. Saz, right? You want to say something about the quiz, maybe?
Yeah. Hi everyone. I hope you are still awake with the lectures and you have another lecture to go. So please have a look at eLearn. I've already uploaded the lecture by Professor Dr. Azim, and it is an interactive lecture, interview type of a lecture. At the end of the lecture, I've also uploaded the survey questions that you need to answer. There are 2 questions pertaining the lecture today. Please answer the questions via eLearn. All right? So have fun and enjoy the rest of the lectures.
Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum, Doctor.
Okay. Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
You said that we are going to answer the quiz based on the lecture. Which lecture? Is it the ongoing lecture or the lecture that you have uploaded on the e-learning?
Both.
Both. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
All right.
Doctor, but there is only now a research framework, and then lecture 6 exit questions, but there is nothing clickable.
At 5 o'clock, the next one will be open. 5
Yes,
o'clock,
it
right?
Yeah. So after 5, we will have the clickable.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Alrighty, okay.
There's no deadline for the quiz. It's open till end of the semester, but I encourage you to answer the question today, tomorrow, or day after tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Unless you want to watch again and again and again, you know.
You're referring to the Theoretical Framework Research Methodology video?
Indeed, yes.
That is the next lecture, is it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So we will have like 2 days, yeah, or 3 days.
All right. That's good.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank
We'll
you.
see you again next week, fully, right? Okay, so
Take care.
good night, good afternoon, whatever that.
Bye.
Good day.
Bye bye. Good.
Bye bye.
Selamat